Namaste. Good morning, or whatever time you're watching this. I'm John. This is Passages and Pranayama. And we will get to, pretty relaxing, more restorative pranayama today. Again, kind of keeping pranayama a little bit on the easy side. But today we're reading out of Swami Satchidananda's Yoga Sutra, and 117 today. And 117 is really cool. So there's so many parts of the Yoga Sutra that remind me of Kramer from the from Seinfeld. I don't know if anybody remembers that episode where he talks about levels, like all these different levels. 117 example of these various levels that we go through. And essentially what's happening in 117, how about if I read it first? I always get ahead of myself. All right, 117. Samprajnata Samadhi is accompanied by reasoning, reflecting, rejoicing, and pure I amness. It's like, it's a weird one. I suppose they're all a little bit weird. But essentially what Patanjali is asking us to do, well, let's think about Samprajnata Samadhi first, right? This is Samadhi is like deep absorption into a thing. Samprajnata is like completely, entirely, consciousness, right? Samprajnata, right? So it's like completely and entirely absorbed in that thing that we might be contemplating. And that's what the exercise in 117 is all about, right? If we're going to apply Kriya Yoga, which of course comes up in chapter 2, if we're going to apply Kriya Yoga to this sutra, there's these various levels that we might go through. So at the onset, right, we have what's called vitarka, right, reasoning, right? And this idea of like reasoning is what we end up doing is taking the gross objects, right? So it could be, any object, a candle flame. The candle flame is, of course, always like something that, we would use, but like say in the Vijnana Bhairava, right? There are all these dharanas, concentrations that you go through, 112 of them. One of them is like staring at a spot on the wall. One of them is like, contemplating the emptiness of a jar, stuff like that. Right. And what we're doing is like using an object, right? And we are keeping the mind like completely focused on it, so much so that we are almost like taking it apart, right? We're deconstructing it a bit. These kind of gross objects, right? Again, savitarka, right? We're using the object, right? On an object, on reasoning on an object, right? Vitarka ultimately means reasoning. Vichara, right? Vichara. Well, before we get there, right? Before we get to vichara, like savitarka could also mean like, we have these, this is where the folds of more layers kind of come in here, because we can also think about like things more subtle as well. Right? So sound, for instance, right? Listening to a gong or something like that, right? And the we're going to do later on is meant to kind of keep the mind focused on a sound. All right, but we'll get there. So vichara, reflection, right? Reflecting on something. So, we've kind of taken this gross object apart We go through, this very not cognitive, because, getting into that state of deep concentration is so important. As a matter of fact, I got to back things up just a little bit because, right, Samprajnata Samadhi, right, you completely, entirely, like absorbed in this deep state of consciousness. There are a path. There's a path to get there, right? And we see this, of course, in the eight limbs, right? The eight limbs, the last three, the internal limbs, concentration, meditation, and the eight limbs, right? The eight limbs, the last three, the internal limbs, concentration, meditation, and finally absorption. So, right, we first have to exercise the mind. Right? And then, so by exercising the mind, we keep the mind focused on a thing. In this case, that very first step is keeping the mind focused on any single object, right? It could be the plant here or something like that, right? An image or so on. Okay, so with these, the path that we're supposed to take to reach the state of samadhi, you can't just jump in, right? Because if you just jump in, we now encounter what is going to end up happening. Was it the eighth obstacle, having not established a firm footing, right? We don't have a good foundation, we fall from it, and therefore we've got to start over again. Or worse yet, we jump so far ahead of ourselves without first conditioning the mind, because that's essentially what we're doing. Like much like we condition the body in asana, we condition the respiratory system in pranayama, we're conditioning the mind in these three different states. First, right? Well, maybe even first, before we even get to concentrations, right? The dharana, right? The concentration, meditation, samadhi, right? We learn focus, right? We could take these different paths to get there, right? And in this case, we just pick out a single object and we spend a little bit of time staying focused on the object. I forget what it is. It might be the Vijnana Bhairava. Where there are essentially two states when we practice, right? I forget the Sanskrit, but there is the state in which we are concentrating on the thing, and then there is everything else, right? when some other thought comes in. Now that is to be expected, right? So that's so important to remember, right? That we're, to say, okay, I'm going to practice savitarka, concentration, samprajnata here, and I pick out an object, say the plant or something like that, and I break it down to its little parts, right? My daughter's now, going through the different parts of the plant, roots and stem and leaves and flower and fruit and all that stuff. And, but we think about the leaves and chlorophyll, and we're breaking things on that thing, going deeper into the more subtle realms of it. All right, but anyway, we're using that object. But if I intuitive joining with the object itself, then we lose it, right? We lose our focus, right? The focus is lost. All right. Okay, so again, vichara, that reflecting. The reflecting part of things. So we have savitarka on the object, savichara, right? Reasoning, right? Reasoning, and this is like, it's more subtle, right? On the subtle, right? The communion the plant has with sunlight, right? The waves of light. We've gone, now we're in that more subtle realm. The third layer here, so we have vichara, right, which is reasoning, the more gross level, right? Vitarka, the peaceful state, right? We witness something, an object, right, and witnessing its stillness, right? We're contemplating on that. Right? The mind goes deeper, right? It becomes more absorbed in that object. All right, so Ananda, that's the third one. The fourth one, Asmita, Pure ego, which is weird, right? Because like now, often asmita is pure ego. It's ego. That this is like right. This is something I've been talking about quite a bit. If you kind of attend some of my talks, especially like on Sunday mornings, the this pure I amness, this pure ego, is really communion with the self, the jiva, the soul, pure consciousness. Like pure I amness, pure ego is not like let me become self-absorbed. Right? Right? So it's important. That distinction is so important, right? Because we're it's not about the gross self. It's not even about the subtle self. It is about the all-encompassing self, the all-pervading consciousness, right? That yoga philosophy is so much about, at least in most of these orthodox schools that I oftentimes discuss, and beyond the orthodox schools as well. I should mention it's just a little less familiar. So, deep concentration, deep contemplation, absorption. I love samadhi. That translation of absorption. It's my favorite. I know there's various translations of that word, but it's such a perfect word to use, right? A perfect translation to become absorbed in that thing. Now, really profound things happen in this deep. As I mentioned, the Vijnana Bhairava, these different concentrations that are 112 of them. Staring at a spot on the wall. That reminded me of a story. This is the story of Dhammo, or also known as Bodhidharma, the teacher, the first teacher of the Shaolin Temple, who went into a cave, I think, for like 9 years or something crazy like that, and just stared at a wall and meditated and came up with like this. Like really, what is now known as qigong, which is somewhat similar to yoga. Other things that remind me of this state. There's a great story in Apologize that I do not remember that it's not right there on the top of my head right now, but a beautiful book about consciousness, where consciousness might come from. Again, the author is Michael Gazzaniga, and so sorry, I don't remember the title. But he talks about, someone who is, deep in their work. You can imagine, if you will, someone in a lab, scientist, physicist, or somebody working deeply on their project, and they're just stuck. And they're like, okay, they abandon their work for the day. And the moment they really like kind of soften a bit, their focus is turned elsewhere, then all of that information starts to like kind of, the spark is lit, and all of a sudden the solution to their problem pops into their mind, right? They're out like walking in the woods or something like that. If I remember, the story goes something like that. All right. So anyway, today's pranayama deals, so we have savitarka on on the object, right, on the gross object, right? We have savichara. So sa is like, it's kind of like on, fixed, right? On the subtle, right? Sananda, right? On joyousness, right? And then finally, sasmita, right? On the pure ego, on pure, the ego being connected to that deep consciousness. All right, so this pranayama, Brahmari, if I remember correctly, the Sanskrit, is the sound of a bee. Right? Sound, right? It's a useful therapeutic sound you make right? And it just goes it's a sound. It's the end of Om. So when we think about savichara, the subtle elements, right? The use of a gong, right? Again, reflecting on the different concentrations in the Vijnana Bhairava. We have the sound of stringed instruments, I think, is one of them. But it's sound. Right? The mantra, right? It comes up here in one. I forget. 20, 28, 29, some 120, 29, about the sound of Om. Okay, so this pranayama, though, right, we take 2 cycles of full inhales, 3 rounds of Brahmari, right? And the only thing that we're doing is we're taking a full inhale, a little restriction here at the glottis, the nasal, vibrating those vocal folds. Now, we're close your eyes, relax your face, your jaw, shoulders back. Let's take an inhale and exhale. And inhale. Exhale. Inhale. And exhale. Now take a full inhale. And repeat. Deep inhale. Last one, deep inhale. Inhaling and exhale. Now just loosen control of your breath. Keep breathing, obviously. And let those remnants, vibrations, the mind rest on those lingering vibrations for the next few moments. Exhale. Deep inhale, shoulders rise. I hope you enjoyed it. It's a kind of a unique meditation, right? It's calming, right? I hope it's a good start to your day. If you have any questions at all or suggestions that, things you might want me to talk about, please send them along. All right. Have a wonderful day. Peace.